We're not live yet. Now.
Let me say thank you for everyone for tuning in to a special edition of Talking with Tonya. Today I have a very special guest, Dr. Pamela Pugh, and she is president of the
Michigan State Board of Education,
Michigan State Board of Education, and she's running for the Michigan Senate.
U.S. Senate.
Oh, the U.S. Senate. Thank you. Thank you. I'm so excited. Listen, I'm getting nervous, y'all. I'm getting nervous. So I'm going to let her introduce herself because this is such a treat to have her here so she can express to us. She's one of three candidates and she's local. She's worked in Flint. She's done some amazing things. And I just want to highlight her and all of the amazing things that she has done for our community. So first of all, Dr. Pamela Pugh, tell us about yourself.
Thank you, Councilwoman, for having me and for the listening audience. It's a great opportunity to be here. And I know we've been trying to do this for a little while, but as you said, I have been a resident of this great state for 51 of my 52 years. Next month, God willing, I will be saying that I've been here 52 of my birthday? 53 years, December 20th. Didn't we realize that we're both Sagittarius?
We are, girl. Give me some. Yes.
Yes. So, God willing, I will be saying 52 of my 53 years in short order. I've been in Michigan. And so just about all of that time, I've been in Saginaw, Michigan. And I consider Flint my second home, as you know. And so grew up here in Michigan, went to school in Florida for my undergrad, Florida A&M University. And but other than that, have been in Michigan and served as a chief public health advisor here in the city of Flint.
You did some great things. I want to get into that because people don't really understand what you did. And really, you created the map work and the framework for something that you had nothing to figure out. You created and you were a trailblazer. You are a true trailblazer.
Thank you.
But let's talk about your education. You hold a degree. I believe you're an engineer.
Yes, I have a degree in chemical engineering from Florida A&M University.
Yeah, she's smart.
I'm a rattler, yes.
Very smart.
And then, of course, went to University of Michigan, go blue. And so went to University of Michigan for my master's as well as my doctorate in public health and with emphasis in environmental health sciences. So most of my work has been in the space of environmental and climate justice and making sure that we're looking at public health from a health equity lens. And so that's where most of my adult career has been spent. So before coming to Flint, I was working in the city of Saginaw or county of Saginaw. I was an official there and spent 14 years at the Saginaw County Health Department working around children's health issues mainly and helping our community to forge relationships with faith-based, community-based philanthropy, as well as business. And I was able to lead our community in bringing in millions of dollars to do that.
What is environmental? Because a lot of people may not understand when you talk about environmental health, what in injustice. A lot of people, we know from Flint because you worked through that and you created the framework to help bring Flint out of that.
Right.
But what is that? People don't understand.
When we talk about environmental justice, I always go back to some of my learnings and thinking about all the injustices. When we're talking about distributive justice. So where is pollution? And there have been reports, Waste and Race, that was done in 1994 and then done again, I believe, in like 2004. So they did a first report, second report that showed that waste sites were more likely to be in Black communities. Black communities are more likely to be in polluting communities. When we look at Flint, now that's like the poster child of environmental injustice. When you look at injustice, not just from where how pollution is distributed, where polluting sites are, but also how we had a government that failed to protect a community. We can talk about the injustice in the justice system,
Mhm.
where there was no criminal charges,
None.
as well as when we look at the civil suits.
Right.
Has there been, um, punishment that equals the crime? Has there been uh, any way that this community has been, and those who have been the victims have received anything? Uh, and you really can't, you
Yeah.
really can't pay for the
What was
harm that was
done.
done, but at least has this government tried to do that?
And I think most people would say no. Um, so would this also include poverty? Because would it also include we talk about Black people, but also injustice where there's also people lower
Hmm.
income, poor cities or communities where we see the
Right,
injustice is at.
right. You will see definitely income driven as well as race driven injustice.
Right.
And so the report that I was referring to looked at race as well as income, and race was the driving factor from where they would see a polluting facility or a waste facility more likely to be sited near and around communities of color. But absolutely, when we look at income in a community like Flint,
Mhm.
um, the thought is, and as the data would show, there have been reports
Mhm.
that have been put out, even by our own Michigan Department of Civil Rights, that talks about the environmental injustice that happened here. So we can look at the environment, we can look
Mhm.
at injustice in the criminal justice, in the criminal justice or lack thereof. We could also look at procedural injustice,
Mhm.
where people were not able to be a part of the say of
Right.
from where the water, we can go upstream to the water switch, when the voices of Flint residents were not heard when
Right.
they were telling their government, don't do that, and they still did it. And all of the evidence would show that switch should not have happened so quickly, without some sort of um, study or thoughts as to how could they make that water safe,
Mhm.
and make sure that the water could work within that water system,
Right.
that had been the Detroit water system for so long, a system that transported water from the Detroit water
Right.
system, and to make a switch so hastily that the residents knew, but the people who were paid and funded to protect the health as well as the infrastructure were not able to understand that or hear the people. Was and is an injustice.
Right. And people didn't have a say. Flint is still broken.
Hmm.
And so me sitting on council, I hear a lot of issues from the residents. And one of the things I understand, Flint is at the local level. And I tell people we have got to have someone who's involved at every level. Council is your local, then you have your county, you have your state, and you're now seeking the office for the US Senate.
Right.
And so seeking that I think is very important. And you bring a very unique set experiences to where you had to, with the water crisis, figure it out. You, a lot of it may have been textbook learning, but you actually had to apply your textbook learning. And so when we look at all the different candidates, I don't think anyone has your experience. I mean, and that's unique for you because what Flint went through, no community should go through,
Right.
but they have. Benton Harbor has went through it. We know that in other states, I believe Jackson, Mississippi has went through it.
Hmm.
And there's other areas that have, and they're predominantly Black,
Right.
which are all over the US.
Right.
I was speaking to one of the council members in Houston, Texas, and they have a problem there
Hmm.
also. So we're finding that these issues are, as you stated, in communities where pockets of Black people or poor communities
Right.
which don't have anyone to advocate, speak up for them,
Right.
to let them know you can't come here and do
Right.
this because it doesn't happen in more affluent areas
Hmm.
at all.
Hmm.
It just doesn't happen.
And if it does, they fix it.
They fix it. Correct.
And I think that one of the things that we saw here in Flint is that at every turn, there was always this push
Mm-hmm.
to cut corners
Mm.
and to, make sure that there was just enough being done to
Mhm.
say that something had been done versus really fixing the problem. And a big part of the problem that needed to be addressed was the trust in this government that had failed
And lack
the
of.
people. And so that meant that we had to do more
Mhm.
to bring people into the understanding and to be able to see exactly what it was that we were doing. One of the things that we wanted to do was to bring a water lab here so
Mhm.
that the residents of Flint could have a better understanding of how their system was being rebuilt,
Mhm.
how the water was being made safe, and so they could see it up close and up front. And this is something that happened in Canada. And so we wanted to mimic something like that because we knew that a lot of the work that we had to do was to rebuild trust in the government system as well
Right.
as the infrastructure and the water system. And I don't see that has been done yet.
Well, I want to take it back to you work for the city of Flint.
Mhm.
Your position was created at a time, and along with your title, because we were in a water crisis, and Flint had been poisoned.
Right.
Lead had been leaching into into the pipes.
Mhm.
There were cases of Legionella, which you monitored, and you kept the residents aware. Every
Yes.
week, you had reports out,
Mhm.
and they were publicly posted so that people knew what our water levels were testing at. We have not had that since you have been
Mhm.
there. I want to talk about with your title with the city of Flint, what did you do? And what did you do for the residents? Because people need to understand it takes a very special person to get in and say, you know what? I'm going to get in here and I'm working with a group of wonderful people. You worked underneath Mayor Dr. Karen Weaver
Mhm.
at the time, who appointed you to this
Mhm.
position, who was a trailblazer in our
Right.
community, with leading us out of the water crisis. At that time, Flint was at 90% when she was in office and you were there, and we're still at 90%, and still Flint is still
Mm.
broken.
Mm.
So we're breaking barriers, and Flint had been fast tracked and ahead of schedule about a year, a little over a year of finishing those pipes, and then it got stalled. It wasn't because of COVID, if we have been misled to believe. But tell us, what was when you got in there and you said, "Okay, they have been poisoned. What am I going to do?" Because how do you know what to do? What was it that you were thinking about? Because most people would say, and you would become overwhelmed.
Mhm.
But
It was funny because listen, the first day that I was to come to the city,
uh-huh.
it was October 2nd of 2016, and I was looking at CNN News, and across the ticker came was I was reading that Flint had a Shigella outbreak, and so I'm like, oh wow. So
So
my
what's a
first
Shigella outbreak? Because everyone doesn't know. A
no, it
legit,
was no,
you
no.
said
This
Shigella?
yeah, this was Shigella. This is October.
I've never heard of Shigella.
Yes,
So
yes.
what is Shigella?
It,
Because some people may think that's a fancy sweater. But
no, there were a lot of opportunistic pathogens that were in the water.
right.
And so in this particular case, and if you look it up, we can look it up there. That was what was going across a ticker, and that's
Wow.
how I found out on CNN News. I would be starting the next day. So my first day at work, maybe my first or second day at work, was a press event
Okay.
about Shigella, and there was the conversations around were people using running water to wash their hands because that was one of the common linkages or causes of the spread of this particular illness. And so that just let you know, I mean, all of the things that we were dealing with the water, it was something new
Right.
every day. And so how I met those
So are all
issues,
these things contributed to the switching of the water?
there were studies that were done. So
Mhm.
without getting into all of the
Right.
details of that, probably,
Directly.
maybe not directly. There was thoughts of the water system and how the water system was damaged and were
Mhm.
pathogens getting in that way. There were also, like we said, there were the thoughts of were people using the typical hygiene methods that were needed to destroy the pathogens. And so there were lots of studies. I don't know where we landed there with that, but meeting this crisis was meeting it with the voice of the people in mind and always in my ear. Before I came to the city of Flint officially in my role as chief public health advisor, I was working with the NAACP, the national NAACP, and the local NAACP. And for a whole year, I was listening to the voice of people, gathering information on what they saw as the problems, or what problems and issues they were experiencing, but also what they felt would be the solutions. And we turned that into a 20-point plan that was used for the people of Flint to take to decision makers at the state, local, and federal level.
So you had a 20-point plan.
Yes. And so that was about a year that I had been here listening to people, not knowing that I would be
in that position
of chief public health advisor. So
you came with experience.
How do you address crisis? So listening to people. And so I had a whole year of knowing people, the people of Flint, interacting with the people of Flint that was outside of me coming into this role. I can also say that my first crisis was not the city of Flint. In Dixon, Tennessee, we were dealing at the time with what was called the poster child of environmental injustice. There was a family that was drinking well water laced with a carcinogen, and they had removed the dog pound right around the corner from the property of a Black family, but the Black family drank the water for about 10 years before they removed them. And so there were people who had cancer. I was involved with Katrina and being in New Orleans before Katrina happened. So seeing these crises come and having that experience also helped me in Flint. And I will have to say the work that I was doing in Saginaw prepared me, not knowing that there would be a Flint water crisis. And then being in my position as on the State Board of Education, I would say that all of those pieces prepared me, but just really walking hand in hand with the residents who had become the experts, because unfortunately they had to, because again, there was a government that just was not moving fast enough, was not acknowledging their concerns, and was denying them to express what they were experiencing. And so when you ask what prepared me, I would say all of those things. And I always say that me landing here, and in most places that I've been in, it's been by divine order. I had been working in childhood lead poisoning for probably over a decade at the time when this happened. And so I had been working at the state level and the local level. I would say working at the local level, but with the state and across the country on some. And my research, my educational research was focused in the area.
So when you started, we had emergency management, and we don't want that back. We do not. And so was that difficult to deal with, because we were still under receivership by the state? So was it difficult for you to implement what you saw a pathway out of the water crisis?
Yes, I could say from the very simple fact that I had to bring a chair. I had to bring a chair to sit in every day from my home.
What do you mean?
My chair, my desk chair. There were no desk chairs.
Wait a minute.
I say that's a
wait a minute. That's kind of important.
Yes.
So you didn't.
I brought myself a chair, and I brought. And I was thinking about this. I brought Jamaica, our chief recovery officer. I brought her a chair from my home.
Are you serious?
Yes.
So
we were literally dusting off cobwebs and just finding a place to sit. And I came in 2016. So still we were dealing with the impact and the residue of just the city being gutted out, and simple things like having a chair.
And so that's what and that's one of the things I'm concerned about now. We just passed a garbage contract that we can't pay for in 5 years.
Mm-hmm.
And so having emergency management and like say the basic thing, they
Mm-hmm.
sold Santa Claus, the garbage trucks, the office
Mm-hmm.
furniture. You didn't even have a chair, not only
Mm-hmm.
you, but Jamaica. She
and
did.
others.
And see, we talk about Jamaica like Jamaica's everybody's friend.
Yes,
like
yes,
we, yes, we do know each other. So yes, but, and so not even being able to function to where you can sit at your desk to just do your job. And see, that's why I like keeping emergency management out. But here it is, you came in and said, you know what? I'm gonna do what it has to take, even if I have to bring furniture from my home,
Mm-hmm.
and you did,
Mm-hmm.
to make sure you're getting the job done.
Right.
And so, working with what was your job? Did you work with the health department? Did you work with the governor or something, the governor's office? Did you work with the state, with the oh gosh,
So we work to implement
Eagle?
Yes, we work to implement a health in all policies approach.
Okay.
And it was a health equity in all policies approach. So what that meant is we were.
Thank you, because I was going to ask.
Yes,
because I want to break it down to the very lowest level.
And please help me to do that. So we wanted to make sure that health was at the forefront and center of all that we did. And thank God for Karen Weaver, because I didn't have to explain things to her.
Right.
She understood. That meant that no decisions would be made without health being the first thought that we had in mind, the health and well-being of people. Because obviously with the switch to the water,
right,
and then continuing for so long before the switch back to the original water source, that definitely was about money, right, and was not about the people. It was about balancing a budget on the backs and lives of people. And so that wouldn't happen again. So that meant that I was in like every meeting. Mm-hmm. And so you ask what emergency management meant. So that meant that we had to go to the people who had caused the problem to help get us
to fix it
of the problem. Yes.
And you guys you ladies had some difficult times because there were some struggles to,
they're very contentious meetings. Most of the meetings that we were in were very contentious. And then we would have to go out and act as if that didn't happen. Kudos to Mayor Weaver for being able to do that. I mean, like I said, there were some heated discussions.
You would have to go in those rooms and then come back out and straighten your crown.
Yes,
it's what you had to do.
Yes,
to still fight for the people.
Yeah, and I'll divulge this here. It did get to the point where we said that we had to daylight things. That meant that we had to let the people know, like, right, some conversations that we were having in public had to be daylighted, or in those rooms,
to let people know,
to be
transparent,
to be
a form of transparency.
Yes, because it wasn't like we weren't trying to be transparent, but right, we were trying to handle things the way that you normally would right handle things.
Right.
If you were dealing with people who were there
for the best interest,
of the people that they were serving.
And so I want to I don't want people to say, I'm not saying that you weren't being transparent, mm-hmm, but when you're doing business, there's two different parts. Yes. When you talk and you're in a room, mm-hmm, or a boardroom or in a conference, as opposed to how you're relaying it to the public. Because you may have to go in there with your dukes up, mm-hmm, and literally slug it out.
Listen, I'm gonna explain it like this. My mother used to tell us behind our closed walls before we went out in public, you show out on me, I'm gonna show out on you.
That part.
So, when we got into the store and something went sideways that she didn't like, there you had it. It had to bear out right there in public.
And that's how I raised my kids. Where you show out is where you're going to get it.
So there were some things that we had to have the conversation a little bit more open so that people could better understand what the struggles were.
What are your top 3 things that you're proud of that you did in Flint?
You know what? I wrote this very nice letter that outlined them. So I don't know that I've committed them to memory, but what I left the city of Flint with is this health in all policies approach. We had, I don't know, double, triple, quadrupled the number of people that were addressing health along with decision making, as well as have brought in millions of dollars. We left the city with even a lead grant that was a very competitive lead grant.
That grant was, how much was in that grant?
I
Because
think-
you had a very, and people don't know, your office operated off of grants, and your staff did. And you were very, I'm gonna say frugal, but you did a lot for the city that people didn't understand. I did not understand everything that you had did, and I thank you for that. And when we transitioned, there was a $24 million surplus.
There was a $24 million surplus.
And it wasn't found. It was not found. It was a $24 million surplus left for the residents that we will be having. I think the next 2 years, a deficit. And that money has been chipped away at. And so you ladies working together, women and women making decisions for our community.
Karen Weaver.
Dr. Weaver, Mayor Dr. Karen Weaver.
You're talking about
Lynette Phillips.
Lynette Phillips, Jamaica Patrick.
Jamaica
absolutely.
Patrick.
When we talk about health and all policies, we were talking about the social and emotional health, making sure that we were meeting the urgent needs through the recovery, chief recovery. We were making sure that we were addressing this through the lens of economic development, making sure that people were having access to the means to have their own businesses, and supporting businesses that had not been supported previously. But absolutely, we were working very closely together, and we were able to look at that we were celebrating the water affordability. There are some things that are now on a state level that we were doing in the city of Flint. We were working with DPW. We were working Department of Public Works. We were work to make sure that we were closing off any void spaces or areas that
opioid.
Flint
is now benefiting from the opioid settlement that you put in, and I believe we got 8.6 million, and there's going to be more given. That was just the first one that was given because this was initiated.
And when we see that attorney, I saw her in July. The attorney,
she's in Georgia.
Yes, she is
phenomenal.
She's
a phenomenal lady.
CK Hoffler.
CK Hoffler, yes.
And she definitely, whenever I've seen her, thanks Mayor Weaver as well as the team for doing that. I worked as the public health with law enforcement, Chief Johnson, as well as Angela Wheeler, Attorney Angela. Yeah, that we worked together.
And see, to have that forefront to say, because we now have a drug overdose. Every day you can look on the sites, keeping the community informed. Someone slumped over a wheel, someone's overdosed, someone has died, someone is unresponsive. And we've had that money sitting there. I understand, and it's one of the things I fight for on council, is that we're not going to misspend that money because someone died for us to get that money, and people are still dying.
So those were some of the things that we were working on. Also, is making sure that we knew where the dollars.
And you were ahead of the curve, though, too,
to do that. So we did a lot. It was no stone left unturned when it came to making sure that we were addressing the needs of the people, and we worked together very well as a team.
And that's important. So tell us about the area you're running for the U.S. Senate. What area is that? What does it cover?
The U.S. Senate, there are currently 2 U.S. senators for every state in the country. And so a U.S. senator covers the whole state. And so it would be the state of Michigan, which I currently cover the state of Michigan as the president of the State Board of Education. I've been elected not once, but twice. I was elected in 2014. So when I was working here in Flint,
Mhm.
I was the vice president of the State Board of Education and was elected when Republicans swept the ticket. I ran as a Democrat and won handily. And then in 2022, just a year ago, won with over 2 million votes. So I've served the state. I've crisscrossed the state. I've stood up for children and educators and parents throughout Michigan. And so as a U.S. Senator, I would represent the state of Michigan.
What are you bringing to the table that makes you unique from any other candidate? And I don't know all the candidates that are running. I just know Dr. Pamela Pugh. So,
That's good.
so what is
It's
it
a good
then?
thing.
That's right. What are you bringing to the table?
So I just mentioned I would be the only statewide elected that has been elected uh, twice.
Okay.
That has been elected that's on the Democratic ticket, and so that's one thing. But what we've been talking about here is whether we're talking about education, whether we're talking about environment, whether we're talking about public health, um, climate.
Mhm.
Those are experiences that I've had, and working at the local level with community, understanding the issues, and in each of
So
those.
you've worked local and state.
Mhm.
And so that I think people, and I want to highlight you for that because that is a unique experience that
Yes.
you've already done it.
Yeah.
And so you get the landscape of Michigan because you
And
are
diverse
Michigan.
communities.
Yeah.
I've been in diverse communities. I think Flint as well, Genesee County as well as Saginaw County, they're pretty diverse
Mhm.
in and of themselves. Saginaw is urban, it's rural. Saginaw is agriculture, it's manufacturing.
And
It's
there's
the
a lot of
gateway to
farm.
yes,
There's a
it's
lot. Sugar
Yes, you
beets.
know.
I
Yes,
know.
yes.
I lived it, so
And
you're right.
and so, but working with our diverse populations, whether it's been in my environmental background or whether it has been in the education background, working with diverse populations, I would say that makes me unique. But serving in crisis
Mhm.
and having to know what to do for the diverse people that we serve. I've stood up against the extremist on the right. I was looking at my social media. I know you see this too from time to time. And, whether it's Moms for Liberty or some of those other groups,
Yes.
I wear it with a badge of honor, the things that they say. But I've stood up against the extremists, those who don't want us to know about our history, don't want our children to have books that
We don't want to
share
be like Florida.
and we're not that far. As a matter of fact, our state board of education meeting was, if you need something to go to sleep to, it got pretty tense because we were having these conversations about book bannings, but we're not that far. But I've stood up to that extremism. But I've also not been afraid to call out those within my own party when we're not moving fast enough,
That's
when we're
right.
not going hard enough.
No more
Especially
status quo.
Exactly. And so, whether it's been Benton Harbor
Mhm.
and calling on a attorney general's opinion on who has the authority to close down a high school, and finding out that the authority was mine and my board members, and helping that community to determine, no, that's not what we want. We don't want our one high school to close, because that would shut off our community. And so, being able to lead that argument and push back on that, standing up for the children of Detroit. We had 7 children who sued the state of Michigan, which meant that they were suing me in my capacity as vice president of the State Board of Education. And our AG's office said, we can't represent you on that. You would have to go get your own attorney. I went and got my own attorney, and I stood up for our babies when we were told that it's no court that's going to opine in their favor. And they did. We had the Sixth Circuit Court that said that these children had a right to a basic education that should allow them to be able to read and write. And what these children were saying, like children elsewhere might say, is that they didn't have books in the classroom, they didn't have teachers in their school buildings, they didn't have heat in the winter, they didn't have air in the summer.
Wait a minute, they didn't have heat. How do you go to school and you don't have heat in Michigan?
There are children, and they shared space with rodents and roaches, and that
in a school.
Yes, and this was preventing them from being able to learn. And if they can't learn, how do they participate in our democracy?
Absolutely.
And so they won their case. It ended up settling with the state of Michigan. And so there was this $94 million settlement that was written, maybe I think it was in 2019, 2020. And then just this last June, guess what? It was written into law. The $94 million goes to the Detroit public school system. So these 7 brave children stood up and very brave. And I stood with them, and having that experience to take those brave and bold
what city was
stances.
This
in? Detroit.
That was in Detroit.
Yes.
And Detroit has had a lot of changes.
Yes. And a lot of state takeover.
A lot, like Flint.
You all shared.
Pontiac, Ben Harbor.
And so, and then pushing for equitable funding in a state that has been at the bottom of all states for equitable funding for our education system. And how do we expect our babies to learn? How do we expect our children to be able to have the future that they deserve?
So you see our children as being very important. And it's not to sound cliche with the song, the children are our future. And I'm not going to sing the song because my family booed me at Christmas for singing. Okay.
I tried to sing it too.
Listen. So the children you see is in their foundation and making sure that we take care of them so they can take care of the next generation and the next generation.
Absolutely. But, and you were asking, what separates me from the others, but we can say it. But when you get into those spaces and having to make those decisions, the drop of a hat and just knowing what's right because you've had the experience, you have relationship with the people that's outside of a political season. And, really outside of that crisis, but you're able to understand because you understand their struggles, but you also know the worth of the people that you're standing up for. And having that experience, living in this state for 51 of my 52 years of life, being that person, there were times when I've had moms in suburbs that have said, Pam, we need you to come stand up for our children because the extremists are taking some stances that we have to push back on, and we need your voice. By the way, you need to bring security with you.
You got death threats.
I get $100 per month, but I've showed up. I've shown up for the people of Michigan, and across the state of Michigan.
So what is the $100 that you're paying?
Yeah, that's my pay. That's my. Yeah.
So you do it because you love it, obviously.
Yes, because I show up for the people.
You show, and that's the thing.
And have shown up.
To be effective, you have to care.
Yes.
And so,
because I could talk about what I want to do, but when we get into those, you get to your council table. Yeah. When I get to that board table,
you got to do the work.
When I get into that room with the people who have the say over us, then what are you going to do? I can talk about what I want to do, but the experiences is what helps and what is going to be the driving factor of how we show up and how we fight for our people and of diverse.
And that's the thing I want people to say. What is our time looking like? Because
20 minutes.
Okay.
19.
Okay. So I do want to say this because Michigan is unique in how it's set up. And like I tell people, it's one thing I could never change when I walk into a room and my industry that I worked in is 1, I'm female, 2, that I'm Black. But I worked with Republican white men and I was the only, I believe, female Black for over 20 years. I worked with them and it didn't bother me. You do your job. And so you are a very diverse person. And so people, there's a stereotype, oh, well, Black people only work with Black people. That's not true with
No.
you. You have a very diverse campaign with people that you're working with, people who work on your campaign, who have good relationships because they trust and believe in you. And that to me shows. So it's not just, you do have some people with some advanced degrees, doctors and so on, but you have regular people who say, I support her because, she supports us and our children. And I appreciate that because you are a unique candidate. You come with experience, you believe and you practice diversity. You have been a catalyst for solving issues, the Flint water crisis. You created the framework for it. And a lot of people don't understand that. You've dealt with issues underneath immense stress. And I remember seeing on your page that I was informed you were getting death threats and you didn't stop. Most people would say, I'm gone. I'm out of here. And you said, you know what? I'm not done. I'm going to do my job. I'm going to fight. I believe in what I'm fighting for.
From Saginaw too.
I know, Saginaw. And people, well, Saginaw's name is, Sag Nasty.
But it's just tenacious. And
it's
grit,
a very
right?
tenacious.
Yeah, grit. That's what
there's a lot of grit. And
we're not talking about Draymond. We're talking about the grit.
Well, listen,
and tenacity.
But I like Draymond. I like Draymond Green, though. Right. So, but I can appreciate that because you don't give up. Because before you got this job, you were already battle tested. Each time that something has been presented before you, you were battle tested. And what I can appreciate and why I have always said to you, I support you from the time that you came out. And the opinions of 810, this is the opinion of Tonya Burns, and not the opinions of 810, that's my disclaimer. but because I know your tenacity, I know that you're battle tested. I know that you're going to fight for everything right for Michigan, whether it's a mom, a dad, a child, a senior, a veteran, a water crisis, jobs, education, poverty, housing. I know that those are things that you're going to fight for. And that was, people say, well, we need housing. People care about the parks. I'm like, listen, housing comes from our federal level.
Yeah.
We need someone saying, hey, Flint, Saginaw, Pontiac, Detroit, we need housing.
A lot of the work that I did, most of my funding has been through HUD.
What's that name again?
Housing and Urban Development. Yes, most of my work has been with that agency. I've worked with just about all of the agencies that there are at federal government, but I definitely have worked most closely with Housing and Urban Development on housing issues, making housing affordable and making it safe for our children. And way back in the day when we were looking at lead in the home, we were also making sure that we were weatherizing homes and making sure that we were pushing those groups and those agencies to work together, because you cannot keep looking at these issues singularly, because that drives some of the costs that we're seeing in the housing. We know that whether it's our utility costs, whether it's the utility bill, or whether it's the water bill, or whether it's the electricity and gas bill, we have to address those issues when we're talking about housing affordability. And so a lot of the work that I've done has been around housing and making housing affordable, working with housing agencies and making sure that we are working in a way that benefits people. And a lot of the federal agencies that I've worked with at the state level have pushed for, and we're finally seeing where our education department is working more closely with our health and human services department, as well as our environmental department, and addressing issues of health, environment, as well as all other child well-being issues. And then doing that, like I said, with HUD, a lot of the work that I've been doing has been helping to forge relationships so that we improve the well-being of people.
So, being a U.S. senator would allow you to advocate to bring more resources
Mhm.
to Flint, and that is one, not just Flint, but to Michigan. And so, like I said, I hear a lot. We need housing. We need affordable housing.
Mhm.
And then we just had in Flint 190 investors swoop in. I'm sorry, an investor swoop in and get 230
Oh,
that were in the
wow.
county, and 190 were in Flint. And so when people say affordable housing, we need housing, that's not at council level. That is on up the chain that trickles down. By the time it gets to us, we're just, it's a
Right.
done deal when those dollars come.
Mhm. Right. So I'll say, like, one of the last projects that I was working on was with the Chisholm Legacy Project and working with Inflation Reduction Act dollars. Pay attention because those are coming next.
Okay,
Just
say it
like
again. The Chisholm.
no, no,
That,
no.
that
Pay attention to Inflation
question.
Reduction Act dollars, IRA dollars.
Okay.
And so some of those dollars have already been released. The next dollars will be around greenhouse gas reduction
Okay.
funds, just like ARPA dollars. There were
Okay.
those of us who were working on the federal side
Hmm.
and trying to make sure that the language is written so that the dollars get to the people who need them the most.
Right.
Now,
Our dollars are not getting to the people who need them the most. But
so
that is not the fault.
that's
That is a
yep.
city council.
So that's
Yeah,
where I'm.
that we're
So
fighting for. That I'm fighting for, and three other council people.
so we know that at the federal level, we have to make sure that we do everything that we can to get those dollars to write the language so that
Hmm.
the dollars can get to the community. But the language also has to be written, and you need people who are who understand the
Right.
ground and how all of the pitfalls and stumbling blocks that are out there, and be able to understand how the language is written so that it does get to the people. I was talking about the Inflation Reduction Act dollars because those dollars, before they were released, I was working with the senators, U.S. senators from across the country, and making sure that we got the language written so that they understood how the
Hmm.
language had to be written so that the dollars got to the local level. And then working with Black owned banks, working with Black owned CDFIs or credit unions, and making sure that they are able to also be a part uh, of the dollars flowing through, because many of those institutions are the
They don't get it.
institutions, and they're the institutions who we would more likely go to. So, having said that, is as a U.S. senator, understanding how legislation can be written, but how it then plays out on the ground level so that low income and
How it's applied.
communities of color are still left out unless the dollars are steered, the language is written so that the dollars are steered to those who are most in need.
Hmm.
And also that we can have some control over what's happening in our communities. And we don't have this repetitive cycle where we get resources that come to the community, but we don't have any control of how they're expended, and that we still end up in some of the same situations. So, as a U.S. senator, that would be a main focus. Would For me, my main agenda item would be
I'm
around
gonna show you this one, but I'm gonna have to call him back because he's still concerned about water.
he should be. And he should be. We work together well. So
Yeah, and he works well with me too.
yes.
I'll get that one back. He's no longer with us, but he should be. But
He's good.
I want to make sure, Mickey, our my time 9 minutes. Um, I want to make sure we talk. I want to talk about gun violence, and just for a few minutes, because gun violence is a serious issue. We're now seeing more children being involved in gun shootings,
Mhm.
children getting shot because of drive-bys, children having access to guns. Uh, what do you have to say about gun violence? And we see it in our urban communities.
Right. So, gun violence anywhere is terrible. We know that gun violence is now the leading cause of death for our children. And it is unfortunate that we are seeing the mass shootings that we're seeing that has now drawn more attention and has caused our legislators at the state and federal level to move more swiftly. This is another one of those areas where urgency should have been happening,
I agree.
because here in Michigan, we have one of the highest death rates due to gun homicides in the country. Um, Blacks
Mhm.
in particular make up 15% of the population, but are dying at a much
Higher rate.
higher rate. Yeah, 79% of the gun violence is to people
Of color.
Black
You're
people.
correct. Yeah, specifically to Black people. So when people
So
say,
this has been a crisis for us. Gun violence is a public health crisis, and it has long been. And I think when we live in a country where in most states, you have a budget that's higher for per prisoner than it is per pupil.
more education.
Yes.
So we're talking about
You can build a prison before you can build
a
a
school.
new school.
So we spend more on a prisoner than we do for educating a child.
Yes. And and without question. And so what we have to do is make sure that we invest in our children, that we invest in activities for our children, give them something to do, so that they are not more prone to get into delinquent behavior. So, first of all, investing in our communities. That is a form of gun violence prevention that we just have not done justice for our children. And making sure in our education system, we can look at the education system. We went from about $0. Well, let me say this. I'm going to say within the last few years, we have $50 million in mental health services to about a 1/3 of $1 billion. And this is post COVID world, because now people better understand the need for mental health services.
Right.
And so we have to also make sure that we put dollars into supports for our children, counselors. Michigan has one of the poorest counselor to student ratio. We need to make sure that we have social and emotional supports, mental health providers. And just like our educators are walking off the job, so have our mental health and social emotional.
It's stressful.
Yes. And we've just not invested in them. So now we've got to build up that profession and make sure that our children have access to those who can help them to think through their decisions, those who can make sure that their mental as well as their physical well-being is being attended to, making sure that we can invest in families and make sure
investing in families, which is key. And can you cue my time for investing in? Because I'm gonna give you the last couple minutes to wrap up. But I want to talk about, because gun violence is important to me. And I look at when I get to or hear of the mothers, who have lost children, and the father. We've normalized gunshots that ring out don't affect me anymore. I listen for the ambulance or the police car, or people call me 24/7 on my phone, because they are scared to call 911. But I want to say with this, I want to give you, because we touched on a lot of topics, and this is not going to be I'm going to have you back.
Thank you.
Because there's so much that I need people to know, because you are a wealth of experience. But I'm going to let you close out. What do you want? A call for action. What is it you would like to say to people? Because you are running for the U.S. Senate. What is it you want to say?
Michigan needs proven leadership.
Absolutely.
And that is what we deserve. People who not just understand our struggles, because we do need people who understand our struggles, but also know that we deserve better, and also understand this promise of opportunity, and will fight for the promise of opportunity for all people, making sure that the government works for all people and not just the well connected. My focus will be on economic dignity, meaning that people, all people, have access to a family sustaining income. I'm a family of one. But, if it's a family of one, or like my grandmother, she had 12, 14 children. But people have a family sustaining wage, that they can have a good quality of life, that they can be respected on their jobs. If they want to be an entrepreneur, that is an opportunity too, to have economy and economic health that supports that. And making sure that families have access to good and affordable health care.
Where can they find you at on the social media?
Pugh, Michigan.
Spell that for them.
PUGH.com. Pugh, Michigan. PUGH.com. Please check me out. We deserve an opportunity at economic dignity and proven leadership in Washington to serve us.
Well, I appreciate you coming and taking the time. This won't be the last time, because we probably could have talked for a week. We could have made this like a slumber party and just talk, because there's so many topics that we can talk about that you know about and we need to hear about, because you are proven and trusted. You are battle tested, and that's what we need. You are battle tested leadership, and that's what Michigan needs. I want to thank our producer, Mickey Jordan, who's over there handling things and making sure we get this out. Mickey, how many minutes do we have? Got a minute and a half. Look, I'm doing good, because I'm usually way over. I'm way over. Well, I want to thank Dr. Pamela Pugh for coming in to do this with me. Do this with actually for everyone, so they get a true view of who you are. And to highlight you. I want to thank each and everyone who took the time. Click like, share, and subscribe. And you can also donate to Dr. Pamela's Pugh campaign,
PughMichigan.com.
And you can cash up 810 a news media group at the cash $, the $, 810 news media group. We appreciate everyone. Click like and share and subscribe. Click like, share,